Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome back to ISAT Podcast. It was a little bit of glare there. Book this time. I don't do books that often. This is Gorgeous George, an outrageous bad boy wrestler who created American pop culture by John Ouya? I guess Ouya, maybe? I grew up hearing about Gorgeous George. My parents are of the right age where, they remember when TVs really first started coming into households. My parents were fairly old. Well, they're older than most people are when they had their first kid. They were in their early 30s. So they grew up, they can remember, being kids and the only one house neighbor had a TV. You go over and you'd watch wrestling. Gorgeous George was, the big TV star of wrestling back then. So I've always been interested in it, man. I've seen a couple of matches here and there. It seems like mostly the only footage his survives all Chicago-based footage, which, hey, at least we got footage. So I've been wanting to read this for a long time. And then probably about a month ago, I was looking around on Amazon, had about 20 extra bucks. So I was like, I'm going to give me a book and a couple other little things. I found this for like $1 something plus shipping. Now, it is, as you can see, an ex-library book. And it's got this little cut in the dust jacket, but I don't give a flying fuck. It still reads, and this was so good. Real simple. It just tells this whole story from the 30s to the 60s. And I didn't know a lot of this. I knew pieces of it, because I'd heard and done a little research, but I did not know a lot of the story. I just assumed he started off wrestling as Gorgeous George, and always no. He wrestled under different names. George Wagnor, a couple other names like that. Based out of Houston, of all places. Did not know that. I just assumed he's one of the Midwest guys. I didn't think he was Texas-based. And actually reading the descriptions of where he started wrestling at, I've been through those parts of Houston when I lived out that way. But there's a picture of George. Just a really good little book. If you're into wrestling history, the Harrisburg Rats. That's something him and his buddies used to play baseball on a dirt lot. And so he got started wrestling. This dude, he came up with so much shit that nowadays just kind of take it for granted professional wrestling. He was one of the first ones to really have a very detailed character. For example, he came out to the ring, he had these big flowing robes, and he had piles and piles of, let me find the pictures in here. Piles and piles of robes. Trying to find what to put. And his thing was he wanted to make sure he never wore the same robe to the same venue more than once. So there's George Wagnor, young George Wagnor. But he also had a valet. He invented all kinds of ways to make the matches. In my eyes, he kind of invented the stall. If you're a wrestling fan, you know what the stall is. It's the heel gets up there and stalls the match from starting. It's kind of the Memphis stalls, what I've heard it called various times. And George invented this shit. He would spend, he'd get in the ring, he'd pull off his robe and fold it, take time folding it, sit down, anyway, pick it back up and start folding it again. And it just irritated the fuck out of her. Look at these robes, man. He had his fancy blonde hair. He'd have golden hairpins. And his hair he'd throw out to the crowd. And sometimes they'd get thrown back at him. He had a valet who was his wife. And then he had a butler, basically. And the butler would come to the ring with basically a gigantic bug spray gun from back in the time. He'd spray people with cologne. It was just, just such great shit. And the thing about it is, George was actually from... Now, I've only ever seen him wrestle as Gorgeous George. I've never seen the George Wagnor shit. I don't think there's any of that left. I mean, the 30s and the 40s, there ain't any footage of that stuff as far as I know. But he was actually, halfway from it reading here, he's actually a fairly competent wrestler, and just the gimmicks what got him over. Some more pictures there. Just such a great history thing. Look, he's getting his hair done. There's his butler. I can't remember his name now. Just such a great book. I'm assuming this is, hold on. That's George's son. There's his wife, Betty. The Gorgeous Turkey Ranch. And another thing he did was he was one of the wrestlers that he actually traveled all over the country to wrestle. A lot of wrestlers would do the circuit. Even into the 80s, there were circuits in wrestling. You had what was called the New York circuit, where you wrestled New York, Connecticut, up in the Northeast. You had California was its own circuit, pretty much. There was the Texas circuit, and then where I grew up at, there was I refer to it as the Deep South circuit. It was Louisiana, a little bit in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. Maybe a little bit into the panhandle of Florida, But George went all over, and one thing things he did is he went out and bought a damn trailer, towed behind his big ass. He had a big ass caddy. Towed behind there, so him and his wife could stay in comfort as they were traveling. Just such an interesting character. And I want to see this movie now because he's in this movie, Alias the Champ, which I need to look around and see if that's out there. Okay, hold on. That's his second wife, Cherie. Has dark hair. Referee magazine, just so much. And there's so many people who are inspired by Muhammad Ali, James Brown. There's a big part here about James Brown. Basically copied a lot of his gimmick on stage from Gorgeous George, of all people. There's Hogan in a tutu, and it's not from Mr. Flair. Of course, Flair got a lot. Gorgeous George, Jesse Ventura. There's so many, so many wrestlers. Just speaking of James Brown, John Waters. John Waters is a huge Gorgeous George fan. I mean, George just inspires so many people, and I'd love to see more footage. So if anybody watching this knows of more Gorgeous George, I know the Chicago Archives is up on YouTube. I've watched the couple of matches that are up there with him. But yeah, Gorgeous fucking George. If you're into wrestling and the history of wrestling, you want to know more about, your flamboyant heels, this is the start right here. Gorgeous fucking George. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment, subscribe. Talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.